Admiral Kethva of the Zoranian Empire stared at the holographic star map floating above the command deck of his flagship. Red markers dotted nearly half the known galaxy, each one representing a system lost to the Devourers. The ancient enemy had returned after 1,000 years of silence, and this time they seemed unstoppable. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Meridian sector," reported his communications officer, her blue-scaled face grim with worry. "That's 12 more systems in the past week." Kethva's forearms trembled with barely contained rage. The Devourers were not just conquering worlds, they were consuming them entirely, leaving nothing but empty space where thriving civilizations once existed. Billions of lives snuffed out like candle flames in a hurricane. "Have the Crystalline Collective responded to our alliance proposal?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from his aide's expression. "Negative, sir. They're too busy fortifying their own territory. The Mechanical Syndicate has also declined, claiming their combat algorithms show the war as unwinnable." Across the bridge, officers from a dozen different species worked frantically at their stations. Zoranians with their 4 arms and scaled skin worked alongside insectoid hive minds, gaseous nebula-born entities in containment suits, and silicon-based rock creatures called the Stonekin. This desperate alliance represented the last hope of free civilizations in the galaxy. "What about the ancient archives?" Kethva asked. "Have our historians found anything useful about the last Devourer War?" The ship's chief researcher, a thin insectoid named Kliktar, approached with several data tablets clutched in his many arms. "Sir, we've found references to something called the Terra Protocols in the oldest precursor ruins. According to the translations, when the Devourers first appeared a millennium ago, the precursors activated something called the Sleeping Warriors." "Sleeping Warriors?" Kethva's interest piqued. Any weapon or ally that had helped defeat the Devourers before could be invaluable now. "Yes, sir, but—" Kliktar hesitated. "The records are fragmentary. They mention beings called humans who supposedly came from a lost world called Earth, or Terra. But, sir, most scholars believe these are just myths, stories the precursors told to give hope during dark times." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of machinery. Every species in the galaxy knew the legends of the mythical humans. They were supposedly fierce warriors who fought with primitive weapons but possessed an indomitable spirit. Some stories claimed they could survive in any environment, others that they never gave up no matter how hopeless their situation became. "Myths don't defeat galaxy-spanning threats," Kethva muttered. "What else did you find?" "There are coordinates, sir. A location in the void between galaxies where the sleeping fleet was supposed to wait. But it's just empty space according to our long-range sensors." "Empty space that no one has ever actually visited," pointed out the tactical officer, a stone-skinned warrior named Granite Fist. "The void between galaxies is too dangerous for normal ships to survive the journey." Kethva studied the coordinates floating in the hologram. It would take weeks to reach that location, even with their fastest ships. Time they didn't have. The Devourers were advancing at an alarming rate, consuming 3 or 4 systems each day. "Sir," the communications officer suddenly straightened. "Emergency transmission from the 4th Fleet." The main screen flickered to life, showing the burned and battered bridge of a Zoranian cruiser. Admiral Veltar, one of Kethva's oldest friends, appeared on screen with his uniform torn and blood streaming from a head wound. "Kethva," Veltar gasped. "The Devourers. They're not just consuming worlds anymore. They're learning, adapting. They've developed some kind of psychic ability that turns our crews against each other. We lost 7 ships to friendly fire before we even engaged the enemy." The transmission cut to static. Kethva closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command crushing down on him. How do you fight an enemy that turns your own people into weapons? Set course for those coordinates in the void, he ordered suddenly. Sir? The navigator looked confused. You mean the mythical human coordinates? Yes. If there's even a 1% chance that the legends are true, we have to try. Send messages to every Allied fleet. Tell them to converge on our location. If we're going to chase myths into the void, we'll do it with everything we have. The journey to the edge of the galaxy took 17 days. During that time, reports continued to pour in from across known space. The Devourers had consumed the entire spiral arm, including the homeworlds of 3 major civilizations. Refugee ships fled ahead of the advancing darkness, carrying the survivors of countless worlds. As Kethva's combined fleet reached the galactic edge, even the most optimistic officers began to doubt their mission. The void between galaxies stretched out before them like an endless ocean of darkness, broken only by the distant light of other galaxies millions of light-years away. Sensors show nothing but cosmic background radiation, reported the science officer. If there was ever anything here, it's long gone. Kethva stared into the darkness, wondering if he had doomed them all by chasing children's stories. Behind them, the galaxy burned while the last free fleet sat in empty space, hoping for myths to save them. Wait, the sensor operator suddenly called out. I'm detecting something. It's faint, but there's an artificial structure out there. Distance? Approximately 1 light hour into the void. On screen. The main display zoomed in on a section of seemingly empty space. For a moment, nothing was visible except distant stars. Then, slowly, a shape began to emerge from the darkness. It was massive, larger than any space station ever built, but it wasn't reflecting light. Instead, it seemed to be absorbing it, creating a shadow against the cosmic background. By the Ancient Ones, whispered the tactical officer. It's a shipyard, a massive shipyard. As they drew closer, more details became visible. The structure was indeed a shipyard, but built on a scale that dwarfed anything in known space. Massive construction bays stretched for kilometers, each one designed to build ships far larger than anything in their combined fleet. Sir, I'm reading power signatures, the engineer reported. Faint, but steady. Something still active in there. Any signs of life? Unknown, sir. The materials used in construction are blocking most of our scans. I can tell you that whatever built this was far more advanced than any current civilization. Kethva made his decision. Take us in slowly. Full alert status, but weapons powered down. If something's been sleeping here for 1,000 years, I don't want to wake it up with hostile intent. The massive shipyard grew larger as they approached, revealing details that defied understanding. The construction bays were empty, but showed signs of recent use. Massive blast doors sealed each bay, and energy readings suggested powerful systems still operated throughout the structure. Sir, the communications officer called out, her voice trembling. I'm receiving a transmission. Source unknown. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a voice unlike anything they had ever heard. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with an accent and cadence that seemed hauntingly familiar, yet completely alien. Unknown vessels, you have entered the territory of the Terran Defense Force. State your identity and purpose. The crew exchanged glances. Terran, another name for the mythical humans from the legends. Kethva stepped forward. This is Admiral Kethva of the Zoranian Empire. We represent the last free civilizations of the galaxy. We're seeking the warriors mentioned in the ancient precursor records, those who fought the Devourers 1,000 years ago. Silence stretched for long minutes. Then the voice returned, now carrying a weight of authority that made seasoned space warriors stand straighter. Admiral Kethva, I am Captain Sarah Chen of the TDF Monitoring Station. Your arrival was anticipated. The precursor warning systems activated 3 months ago when the Devourers first emerged from whatever hole they've been hiding in. You've been watching? Kethva asked, stunned. We've been preparing. The question is, are you ready to see what humans consider a proportional response to galaxy-scale genocide? Before Kethva could answer, the massive blast doors on the construction bays began to open with a grinding roar that transmitted even through the vacuum of space via their ship's sensors. What emerged from those bays defied belief. Ships, hundreds of them, each one larger than the biggest dreadnought in the Allied fleet, and they moved with a grace and purpose that spoke of advanced technology beyond anything in known space. But it wasn't their size that made hardened warriors gasp in awe. It was their design. These weren't the sleek, elegant vessels favored by most advanced civilizations. These ships looked brutal, practical, built for war and nothing else. They bristled with weapon systems, their hulls scarred and battle-tested despite appearing freshly maintained. They looked like sleeping predators awakening from a long rest. Admiral, Captain Chen's voice returned, now with a hint of what might have been amusement. I hope you and your allies are ready for a fight, because we humans have been waiting 1,000 years for the Devourers to show their faces again. We're ready, Kethva replied, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. Good. Because in about 6 hours, the first Devourer scout fleet is going to arrive here, drawn by the energy signatures of your ships. They think they've cornered the last free fleet in the galaxy at the edge of nowhere. The human warships continued to emerge from the hidden bays, their numbers growing by the minute. Each one that appeared seemed more deadly than the last, their weapon arrays and armor plating speaking of a civilization that had spent a millennium preparing for this exact moment. They're about to learn, Captain Chen continued, why every intelligent species in the galaxy tells stories about humans, why we became myths and legends, and why you never ever give humans 1,000 years to prepare for a rematch. As the last human warship cleared the shipyard, the combined fleet numbered in the thousands. The Allied ships, which had seemed impressive before, now looked like escorts around these massive human vessels. All ships! Captain Chen's voice rang out across all frequencies. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. Today we end the Devourer threat once and for all. Today we remind the galaxy why humans don't stay dead. In the distance, space began to ripple as the first Devourer ships prepared to emerge from hyperspace. The trap was about to be sprung. But Kethva was beginning to suspect that the Devourers weren't the ones setting it. The mythical humans were real, and they were about to show the galaxy what 1,000 years of planning could accomplish. The space around the hidden shipyard erupted into chaos as the first wave of Devourer ships materialized from hyperspace. Admiral Kethva watched in fascination as the enemy vessels, massive, organic-looking monstrosities that seemed to pulse with malevolent life, immediately began scanning for targets. Devourer fleet composition confirmed, reported the tactical officer aboard Kethva's flagship. 47 heavy assault carriers, each one capable of consuming a planet. They're moving to surround us. Admiral Sarah Chen's voice crackled across all Allied frequencies with calm confidence. All Terran vessels, assume formation Delta 7. Allied ships, maintain position behind our screening line and observe. You're about to see why we've been hiding in the dark for so long. The human warships moved with deadly precision, forming a perfect sphere around the Allied fleet. Each vessel took position with mathematical exactness, their movements coordinated in a way that spoke of countless hours of practice. Unlike the chaotic formations typical of most space battles, this looked like a choreographed dance of death. "Sir," whispered Kethva's communications officer, "their formation, it's not just for protection. Look at the weapon trajectories." Kethva studied the tactical display and felt his blood run cold. Every human ship was positioned so that their combined firepower created overlapping fields of destruction with no gaps or blind spots. Any enemy ship that entered their formation would face concentrated fire from multiple angles simultaneously. The lead devourer vessel, a nightmare creature the size of a small moon, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, a psychic transmission that made weaker minds tremble. "Fleeing insects," the voice dripped with contempt, "you have led us to your final nest. Your primitive vessels will feed our hunger well, and your homeworlds will follow." Admiral Chen's response came immediately, her human voice cutting through the alien psychic pressure like a blade through fog. "Unknown Devourer vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of the Galactic Accords on Genocidal Activity. Section 1. Don't. You have 30 seconds to surrender unconditionally." Laughter, if the horrible sound could be called that, echoed from the Devourer fleet. "Terran? The mythical humans? You expect us to believe in children's stories?" 25 seconds. The largest Devourer ship began to glow with internal fires, its biomechanical weapons charging for a devastating first strike. Around it, smaller vessels spread out in an attack pattern designed to overwhelm any defensive formation. 15 seconds. I should mention we've been developing new toys while you were napping. 10 seconds. Fair warning, we hold grudges. The Devourer fleet opened fire. What happened next rewrote everything Ketheva thought he knew about space warfare. The human ships didn't just return fire, they unleashed hell itself. Beams of pure energy, far brighter than anything in the Allied arsenals, lanced out from the human vessels. But these weren't normal energy weapons. Where they struck the Devourer ships, reality itself seemed to crack and buckle. Armor that had withstood planetary bombardments crumbled like paper. "Impossible!" breathed the Allied tactical officer. "Those energy readings, they're tearing apart molecular bonds at the quantum level." The human ships didn't stop there. Missile pods opened along their hulls, releasing swarms of projectiles that moved with impossible speed and agility. These weren't normal missiles. They seemed to phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to intercept. "Phase torpedoes," Admiral Chen's voice explained calmly, as explosions blossomed throughout the Devourer formation. "They exist in several dimensions simultaneously. Very hard to stop something that isn't entirely there." A group of smaller Devourer vessels tried to flank the human formation, using their superior speed to get behind the screening line. They never made it. Point defense systems on the human ships, systems that hadn't been visible until that moment, emerged from hidden compartments and filled space with a network of destruction that vaporized anything smaller than a cruiser. "My God," whispered Ketheva's chief engineer, "those aren't just weapons. They've turned their entire ships into killing machines." The largest Devourer vessel, wounded but not destroyed, attempted to use its psychic abilities to turn the human crews against each other. It had worked against every other species they'd faced, driving entire fleets to self-destruction through induced madness and paranoia. The psychic attack hit the human fleet like a wave of pure malevolence, and absolutely nothing happened. "Did they just try to mind control us?" Admiral Chen sounded almost amused. "That's adorable. Computer, please explain to our guests why that won't work." A different voice responded, clearly artificial, but with a distinct personality. "Certainly, Admiral. All human personnel aboard Terran Defense Force vessels undergo psychological conditioning designed to resist psychic manipulation. Additionally, our ships are equipped with neural dampening fields that block external mental influence. The Devourers might as well try to intimidate our coffee makers." "Our what makers?" asked one of the Allied communications officers in confusion. "Coffee. It's a human stimulant beverage," Chen explained while her ships continued their methodical destruction of the enemy fleet. "We'll introduce you to it later. Right now, we're a bit busy. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the entire Devourer attack fleet had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Not a single human ship showed significant damage. "Sir," reported Kethva's sensor operator, his voice shaking with awe. "I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions. Something big is coming." "Actually," Admiral Chen's voice cut in, "several big somethings. We've been tracking 3 more Devourer fleets converging on this position. They should arrive in about 3 minutes." The Allied fleet stirred nervously. Even with the demonstrated power of the human vessels, facing multiple enemy fleets seemed impossible. "Admiral Chen," Kethva transmitted, "perhaps we should retreat and regroup? You've proven your capabilities, but facing overwhelming odds—" "Admiral," Chen interrupted gently, "you're thinking like someone who hasn't spent 1,000 years planning this fight. Computer, show our guests the full fleet roster." The tactical display updated, and every Allied bridge fell silent in shock. The human ships they had seen weren't the entire fleet. They were just the advanced scouts. Hidden throughout the void, previously invisible to all sensors, thousands more human vessels began to decloak. Massive battleships the size of space stations materialized from nothingness. Carrier vessels that dwarfed planets opened their bays to release swarms of fighters. Command ships that looked like mobile weapon platforms took position throughout the formation. "How many ships do you have?" Kethva asked in wonder. "Enough," came the simple reply. "We've had 1,000 years to build, Admiral. 1,000 years to plan, to prepare, to make absolutely certain that when the Devourers returned, we'd be ready to end them permanently." The second wave of Devourer fleets arrived to find themselves facing not a desperate last stand, but a carefully prepared massacre. These fleets were larger than the first, hundreds of planet killers supported by thousands of smaller vessels. They came confident in their ability to overwhelm any defense through sheer numbers. They learned otherwise very quickly. The human fleet didn't just fight. They demonstrated tactics and technologies that seemed to violate known laws of physics. Ships that could phase through solid matter, weapons that reached through hyperspace to strike targets before they even arrived, and most terrifying of all, vessels that could apparently consume and convert enemy ships into raw materials for field repairs. "Those can't be standard human designs," muttered the Allied chief scientist. "Some of those technologies are theoretically impossible." Admiral Chen's voice carried a hint of pride. "What can I say? Humans are very good at making impossible things work when properly motivated." And discovering that genocidal aliens had wiped out most of the galaxy's civilizations was extremely motivating. The third Devourer fleet arrived just as the second was being systematically dismantled. This one was different. Older, larger, and led by what appeared to be a Devourer Lord, a creature so ancient and powerful that its mere presence made reality warp around it. "Humans," the Lord's psychic voice boomed across space, carrying power that made stars flicker. "So the mythical species reveals itself at last. We remember you from the old wars. You were troublesome." "Oh, good," Admiral Chen replied cheerfully. "You remember us. That should make this easier to explain." The human fleet began to shift formation again, but this time something different happened. The largest human vessels, the ones that had remained hidden until now, began to glow with an inner light that was painful to observe directly. "What are they doing?" Kethva asked his science officer. I don't know, sir. The energy readings are off the charts. It's like they're channeling the power of a star." The Devourer Lord launched itself forward, its massive form surrounded by the twisted wreckage of space-time itself. This was no ordinary creature. It was a being that had consumed the life force of entire star systems, a predator that had grown fat on the death of civilizations. It never got within 1,000 kilometers of the human fleet. The largest human vessel, a ship so massive it had its own gravitational field, opened fire with a weapon that defied description. The beam that lanced out wasn't just energy. It was concentrated reality, raw creation itself, weaponized and directed with surgical precision. The Devourer Lord, a creature that had survived since the dawn of galactic civilization, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not killed, erased from reality as if it had never been. The remaining Devourer forces, suddenly leaderless and facing destruction beyond their comprehension, did something that no one had ever seen before. They retreated. The ancient enemy that had never shown fear, that had consumed galaxies without hesitation, turned and fled into hyperspace. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. "Computer, activate the pursuit protocol. I want tracking beacons on every fleeing vessel. It's time to follow them home." "Admiral," Kethva transmitted, "surely they're beaten. You've saved the galaxy." "Admiral Kethva, with respect, we haven't saved anything yet. We've won a single battle. The Devourers didn't just appear from nowhere. They have a base, a home, somewhere beyond known space. Until we find it and eliminate it completely, they'll just rebuild and return stronger than before." The human fleet began to move, following the fleeing Devourers into hyperspace. But before they left, Admiral Chen transmitted one final message to the Allied fleet. "Return to your home worlds. Begin rebuilding what was lost. We'll send word when it's truly over." "How will we know?" Kethva called out as the human ships began to fade from normal space. The last transmission came as a whisper across the void. "Trust me, Admiral. When humans finish a job, everyone knows." As the last human vessel disappeared into hyperspace, the Allied fleet was left alone in the void, surrounded by the debris of what had once been an unstoppable enemy armada. They had witnessed the birth of a legend, the moment when humanity revealed itself to be not just real, but possibly the most terrifying force in the galaxy. The mythical humans were no longer myths. They were the galaxy's salvation, and possibly its greatest fear. 3 months passed before the galaxy heard from humanity again. 3 months during which every major civilization worked frantically to rebuild their shattered worlds and prepare for whatever came next. No one knew if the humans would return as saviors or conquerors, and the uncertainty kept entire species awake at night. Admiral Kethva stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Zoranian Fleet Command Station, watching construction ships work to repair the orbital defenses around his homeworld. The scars of the Devourer War were still visible across the system. Dead worlds that had been stripped of all life, space stations reduced to twisted metal, and memorial sites marking where entire colonies had once thrived. "Sir," his aide approached with a data pad, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The same message is being broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously." Kethva took the pad and read the simple text. "Mission complete. Returning home. Humanity extends greetings to the galaxy and requests formal diplomatic contact." "That's it?" Kethva asked. "No details about the campaign? No demands or conditions?" "Nothing else, sir. Just coordinates for a meeting point in neutral space and a time, 1 week from now." Within hours, representatives from every surviving civilization were traveling toward the designated coordinates. The location was a system that had been consumed by the Devourers early in the war, a dead system with nothing but the scorched remains of what had once been a thriving trade hub. When the diplomatic fleets arrived, they found something impossible waiting for them. The system was alive again. Where dead worlds had orbited a dying star, now green and blue planets rotated peacefully. Space stations that had been destroyed months ago hung in perfect repair. Even the star itself burned with renewed vigor, as if the damage had never occurred. "How is this possible?" whispered the Crystalline Collective's lead scientist aboard their diplomatic vessel. You can't just recreate an entire star system. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channels, warm and welcoming. Actually, you can, if you have the right tools and enough motivation. Welcome to New Geneva, the capital of the Terran Restoration Zone. A massive space station, larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen, materialized near the system's primary star. It hadn't been there moments before. Sensors showed it simply appeared from some kind of dimensional fold in space-time. "That's impossible," muttered the chief engineer aboard Kethva's diplomatic cruiser. "Nothing that large could be hidden, even with cloaking technology." "Who said anything about hiding?" Admiral Chen's voice carried a hint of amusement. "We built it in a parallel dimension and moved it here for the meeting. Sometimes the best way to keep something safe is to keep it somewhere else entirely." The diplomatic fleets were guided to docking bays that seemed to resize themselves to accommodate vessels of wildly different designs. As Kethva disembarked from his shuttle, he was struck by the station's atmosphere, literally. It felt more alive, more vibrant than any artificial environment he'd ever experienced. The corridors were wide and well lit, with walls that seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed gently with inner light. Plants that had never existed in nature grew from integrated gardens, their leaves shimmering with colors that had no names in any galactic language. "Welcome to New Geneva," a human woman said, stepping forward to greet the arriving delegates. She was tall and slender, with dark skin and silver hair that seemed to reflect light in impossible ways. Her eyes held the depth of someone who had seen entire galaxies born and die. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, director of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Admiral Chen sends her regrets. She's currently overseeing the reconstruction of the Andromeda approach lanes. It turns out the Devourers had been using interdimensional highways to move between galaxies, and we're making sure those routes stay permanently closed." The assembled delegates, representing dozens of species and hundreds of worlds, followed Dr. Vasquez through the station toward a massive conference chamber. Along the way, they passed viewports that showed construction on an impossible scale. Entire fleets of ships were being built simultaneously, each one incorporating technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics. "Dr. Vasquez," the hive mind representative clicked in its complex language, "our species must ask, what are your intentions toward the galaxy? Your power clearly exceeds our own by several orders of magnitude." The human woman smiled, and there was genuine warmth in the expression. "Our intentions are the same as they've always been, to protect those who can't protect themselves, and to ensure that what happened to our galaxy never happens again." "Your galaxy?" asked Kethva. "But you're from Earth, in the local group." "We're from Earth," Dr. Vasquez corrected gently. "The Devourers found our home system during their first expansion, about 1,200 years ago. They consumed Earth, Mars, all of our colonies. As far as we know, the humans on this station are the last of our species." Silence fell over the group. The humans had been fighting a war of extinction for over a millennium, holding on to life by their fingernails while planning their revenge. "How many of you survived?" asked the crystalline collective representative, their voice unusually subdued. "When Earth fell, there were approximately 40 billion humans scattered across our colonies. We evacuated everyone we could to the void between galaxies, along with our industrial base and knowledge archives. The population now is..." She paused, consulting a small device. "Roughly 400 million. The numbers hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The humans had lost 99% of their species to the Devourers, yet they had still built a fleet capable of devastating an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. 400 million, repeated the Stone-kin representative, his rocky voice filled with awe. "And you built all of this?" "We had help," Dr. Vasquez said simply. The precursors didn't abandon the galaxy when they transcended physical existence. They left behind tools and knowledge for those who would need them. We've spent 12 centuries learning to use that legacy. They entered the conference chamber, a vast space with a ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the galaxy. Red markers showed systems still being restored. Blue markers indicated fully recovered worlds, and green markers revealed something new, systems that hadn't existed before the war. "We've taken the liberty of improving on the original," Dr. Vasquez explained, noticing their attention. "Worlds that were marginal for life have been terraformed. Systems that lacked resources have been enhanced. Star lanes that were inefficient have been optimized. Think of it as repayment for the hospitality your ancestors showed our first exploration fleets, back before the Devourers arrived." "You remember our first contact?" asked the Nebula-born representative, their gaseous form shimmering with surprise. "We remember everything," Dr. Vasquez said softly. "Every species that offered friendship to young humanity. Every world that welcomed our explorers. Every act of kindness shown to us when we were just another new species trying to find our place in the galaxy. We've had 12 centuries to remember and to plan how to repay those debts." Admiral Kethva felt a chill run through his system. The Zoranian Empire initially voted to restrict human expansion rights at the Galactic Council. "Yes, you did." Dr. Vasquez's smile didn't waver. "And then, when the Devourers first appeared, the Third Zoranian Fleet was the first to respond to our distress call from the Tau Ceti colony. Admiral Morthak, I believe he was your great-grandfather, died buying time for our civilian evacuations." She gestured to one wall, where names in a dozen languages scrolled endlessly past. "We remember our friends as well as our enemies, Admiral. The restoration includes major improvements to all Zoranian systems, with particular attention paid to the defense networks protecting your core worlds." The diplomatic session that followed lasted for 3 days. The humans presented their proposal for what they called the Galactic Compact, a mutual defense treaty that would prevent another Devourer-style catastrophe from ever occurring again. The terms were surprisingly generous. Humanity would provide advanced defensive technology to all member species, along with assistance in rebuilding war-damaged systems. In return, they asked only for the establishment of monitoring stations at key points throughout the galaxy and the right to maintain a rapid response fleet for emergency situations. "What about governance?" asked the Mechanical Syndicate's primary processor. "Who leads this compact? Who makes decisions about galactic policy?" Dr. Vasquez looked genuinely puzzled. "Everyone leads. Everyone makes decisions. We're not interested in ruling anyone. We've seen what happens when single entities gain too much power over others." "But your technology, your military capabilities," the hive mind representative began, "are tools for protection, not conquest," Dr. Vasquez finished. "We've spent 1,200 years learning to build things that protect and create rather than destroy and consume. The Devourers taught us the difference. Over the following weeks, every major civilization voted to join the Galactic Compact. The benefits were simply too great to refuse. Worlds restored to life, technologies that could prevent future catastrophes, and the protection of beings powerful enough to erase threats from existence itself. But it was the smaller gestures that truly won over the galaxy's inhabitants. Human medical teams appeared at disaster sites, providing aid with technologies that could regrow lost limbs and cure previously terminal diseases. Human engineers showed up at struggling colonies with solutions to problems that had plagued entire species for generations. Human teachers began sharing knowledge that advanced civilizations by centuries in mere years. And always, they asked for nothing in return except friendship and the promise to help others in need. 6 months after the end of the Devourer War, Admiral Kethva found himself aboard a human vessel for the first time. The TDF Endurance was one of the smaller ships in humanity's fleet. only the size of a large space station, but its interior felt more like a living city than a military vessel. "Coffee?" asked Captain Martinez, offering Kethava a steaming cup of the dark liquid that humans seemed to consume constantly. Kethava accepted the cup cautiously and took a small sip. The flavor was complex, bitter, but somehow invigorating. "This is actually quite pleasant." "It grows on you," Martinez agreed. "Literally, in this case. We've been developing new varieties that can thrive in different atmospheric conditions. The crystalline collective particularly enjoys the variety we created for silicon-based metabolisms." They stood on the bridge, watching human construction teams work on rebuilding the Draconis system. Entire worlds were being reshaped with technologies that seemed more like magic than science. "Captain," Kethva asked carefully, "what happens now? The Devourers are gone. The galaxy is rebuilding. What does humanity do next?" The human officer was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars wheel slowly past the viewports. "We keep the promise we made to ourselves when Earth died," he said finally. "We make sure this galaxy becomes the kind of place where species can grow and explore and discover wonders without fear. Where children can look up at the night sky and see possibilities instead of threats. And if other threats emerge, other enemies that can't be reasoned with?" Captain Martinez's smile was gentle, but his eyes held the same steel that had faced down the Devourers. "Then they'll learn the same lesson the Devourers did. Humans don't give up. We don't surrender. And we really, really don't like bullies." In the months that followed, the galaxy settled into a new rhythm. Trade routes reopened between systems that had been isolated for years. Scientific collaboration reached levels not seen since the height of the precursor civilization. Art and culture flourished as species shared their heritage with new friends and allies. And everywhere, quietly and efficiently, human ships patrolled the void between stars. Not as conquerors or overlords, but as guardians. The galaxy's immune system made manifest. The legends had been wrong about humanity in one crucial way. They weren't myths or stories told to comfort children in the dark. They were promises. Promises that no matter how dark the galaxy became, no matter what horrors emerged from the void, someone would always stand between the innocent and the darkness. The mythical humans had returned, and they were exactly what the galaxy needed them to be: its protectors, its healers, and its friends. The children of Earth had come home.